welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today to talk about our new sustainability index. And for those who don't know me, I'm Peter Thurn. I'm the Stakeholder Relations Specialist at DataGene, and I have with me today Marcus Rees, who's the General Manager of ABS. So thanks for joining us, Marcus.
Thanks for inviting me, Thurny, and thanks for DataGene to extend that welcome as well.
Yeah, so sustainability is a topic on, well, I mean, I was just listening to the news before we got online, and they were talking about sustainability and talking about carbon and how to deal with it, and it's going to become an increasing part of our life in the next few years. So in anticipation of that, we've developed the sustainability index that has a carbon mitigation focus. I suppose we've called it a sustainability index because we don't think this will potentially stop at carbon. We think that in the future we'll be looking at other things, and when we look around the globe and we see what's happening elsewhere in the likes of New Zealand and also in Holland, we can sort of see the impact of nitrogen. So there may be other things in the future that we need to consider when we think about sustainability, but at the moment our focus is very much on carbon. So I'll just start sharing a bit of a presentation. Hopefully this works. Okay. So can we all see that? If Marcus can see it, we should be good.
I can see it.
Beautiful. So why are we talking about sustainability? Well, the Australian dairy industry has already made a commitment to minimising its environmental footprint, and that includes reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by the year 2030. So that's the first step by our industry to recognise the need to reduce our emissions. Sitting over the top of that, though, we know that the Australian government has a long-term plan to reduce carbon emissions so that we can get to net zero by 2050. So we have these two, I suppose, imperatives that we need to deal with here, one from the dairy industry, but also one from the government. We also know, and this is work done by Ag Victoria, that 60% to 70% of our dairy farm emissions come from methane that are produced by the rumination of cows. So when we look at our contribution to reducing greenhouse gases, it really, the bulk of it is going to sit in how we manipulate that cow space. And obviously, if we're talking about cows, then we can take a breeding approach to it. And we know that our friends in Ireland at Chuggas, who are right across this stuff as well, have recognised that increasing genetic merit is one of the most cost-effective strategies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so it's really, when you think about the cost-effective nature of that, it's really just a matter of flipping the decision that you're making. I use this bull instead of that bull. So really, from a practical perspective, the practice change is not that great.
Well, I can add to that, Thurny, in that ABS in America have done some research in that the higher your net merit bulls you use, the less emissions are out there as well. It's the same all over the world.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that as we go too, Marcus, because you know, most of the indexes around the world, if they've got an emphasis on things like survival and production and efficiency, then they're already pulling in a positive greenhouse gas emissions direction, and that's where our new sustainability index ends up as well. So, Marcus, ABS have made quite a commitment to sustainability. Can you just give us a bit of an overview of where ABS, Genus, where their view of the world is when it comes to sustainability?
Well, we use ABS a lot, but basically it's coming from Genus, which is our parent company that owns ABS globally. And so they are a stock listed company, and they are very much into, as you mentioned before, getting to or having the plan of getting to net zero emissions by 2050. And I think we're about like a 50% by 2030, or maybe similar to what you put up there, about 30% less emissions going forward. So that's being driven by Genus in the UK globally, and they're putting quite a few things into place, like all their bull barns are going to be powered by solar panels into the future, and they've invested a lot into that. They're going to be starting to use electric cars in the UK, so hybrid cars that probably hybrid and then moving into electric cars for all staff in the UK and into the US. I don't think that's going to work in Australia, because I don't think we've got enough points, and we have a long way to travel between places sometimes. So so that's been an initiative, and you know, they're going to start recycling all the waste from the bulls to, you know, turn into energy, and yeah, recycling that, putting on pasture, and getting the bull barns down to net zero as well as fast as they can. So it's being driven by Genus, and you know, you'll hear a lot of words like ESGs coming into the future, environmental, social governance. You know, everyone's looking to have those kind of things in place in their business. So some protocols in place for that as well. So
as you said, being a publicly listed company, it's there's the shareholder pressure that's coming on to the business to say, hey, you need to green up here, basically. And so that not only is the product that you sell, it's the way you operate your business as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's being driven for sure by the shareholder, by the public putting that pressure on, all that expectations to start heading that way. Just not the government, but the general public that we sell our products to. You know what I mean? People that are going to be buying our milk, our cream, our butter are asking for that, I would suggest, and we're seeing that. We're definitely seeing that over in New Zealand, and we're heading that way here in Australia as well. And
talking with Andy Rudder in the UK the other night when we did our webinar with Andy, I mean, the same thing. You know, they refer to them as milk buyers, but their milk buyer in the UK is the guy that is driving farmers into this space and saying, hey, you know, our consumers are wanting this, so you need to provide this. Yeah, like they have the red tractor. I only ever heard about that. We employed a young lady called Courtney Thornton that was with Genus. She's now with us, about the red tractor, where they've got to go through all these checkpoints to be able to sell their milk. And a lot of this stuff's already over there in the UK, and they're well into, you know, no bobby calves, and you know, having a place for every calf that's born on the farm. So that's being driven by the consumer. Yeah, cool. All righty, so we might just move on. Yeah. So just want to do a little bit of scene setting, because it's we might, in terms of terminology through the course of this, we might kind of flip from carbon to methane and that sort of thing. When we're talking about methane or carbon, we're really talking about the same thing. We're talking about greenhouse gases, and we can see from that little diagram that by and large carbon dioxide makes up most of the greenhouse gas emissions around the world, at about 3/4 of them. But then the next biggest contributor is methane. So, but all those different gases, they all contribute to global warming, but they don't all have the same effect or the same heat effect. So they've developed a thing called the global warming potential. And that puts in perspective where I suppose methane fits. So in this index that they've created, carbon dioxide has an index value of 1. But the GWP, the global warming potential, reflects the magnitude of the warming potential compared to carbon dioxide. So in the case of methane, it has an index weighting of 25, which means it's got 25 times more the warming capacity over 100 years compared to carbon dioxide. So even though it's only making up 16% of all global emissions, it is a much more potent gas. And it's the gas that we need to deal with predominantly in agriculture. And it's because of this. It's because of cows that ruminate. So as cows ruminate, they produce methane as part of that process. And that methane, the bulk of it, as you can see in that diagram, the bulk of it is being belched out. A little bit comes out the back end, but most of it comes out the front end. And it's this aspect that we need to deal with as part of the dairy industry and as agriculturalists. So we know that there's a range of tools that farmers have to use, that they can use to reduce emissions. Obviously, pasture utilisation is one of them, and the guys in Ireland have done some really good work on this, looking at how methane production varies based on the quality of pasture. So as the amount of lignin in the pasture increases, the amount of methane produced also increases. So there's pasture utilisation strategies that can be used on farm to reduce your methane production. We've all heard about the seaweed, and you know, it'd be lovely if there was a good breakthrough in that space in terms of using those feed additives to reduce methane production. Obviously, pasture improvement, on-farm energy generation. You know, using your waste and converting that to energy. More efficient utilisation of fertiliser is another one. Again, how you manage your waste overall. And what we're doing is adding breeding to that list of tools. So we're not saying that breeding is going to solve all your problems, because it won't. But through the sustainability index, we're going to add a genetic component to all of those other management components that you can utilise to reduce your on-farm emissions. So another thing that we need to address is just some terminology around emissions. And there's two ways of looking at emissions on farm. One of them is what we call gross emissions, which is simply just the total amount of carbon that's emitted from your herd or from your farm. And to reduce that, you basically need to reduce the number of rumens that you have running around your farm, because that's the thing that's creating the methane. So if you've got less cows, smaller cows, lower producing cows, but also more fertile cows and longer lived cows, so they hang around in the herd longer, you will reduce your gross emissions. But unfortunately, going down a gross pathway actually is not a very profitable thing to do, because we're here to produce food for the world. We're here to produce protein predominantly. And having lower producing cows and less cows doesn't meet that goal. And nor does it help us create a sustainable industry, using sustainable in the other sense, a sustainable industry and a profitable industry. So there's a balance there somewhere we need to find, and we find that through going down what we call an emissions intensity approach or pathway. So that's looking at the amount of carbon that we emit divided by the amount of product we produce. So what we're trying to do is drive efficiency in that space. And we do that by diluting the amount of carbon that we produce by the amount of product we produce. So we're looking for cows in that instance that have higher production and have greater carbon efficiency, basically producing more milk per tonne of carbon that's produced. So if we take that to the next step and just use a simple example, we've got two cows that over their lifetime both produce 20 tonnes of carbon. However, one cow produces 1 tonne of protein in a lifetime, but cow B produces 1.5 tonnes of protein. So it's really cow B becomes the more emissions intensity efficient cow, and that's the cow that we're driving for. The cow that's producing more protein for the amount of carbon that she produces. So from there, we've created what we call our sustainability index. Now, the sustainability index is a desired gains index. So it's like the HWI. So when we created the HWI, we said we need an index here that puts extra weighting on particular traits that are of interest to a group of farmers. Those weightings are not necessarily economic weightings, because the BPI is our economic index. And what we've done is ramp up the weightings of a couple of different traits, like fertility, that are not necessarily reflective of the economics, but are reflective of a breeding direction that people want to go in. We've used that same approach when we've developed the sustainability index. We've taken the BPI and we've said, well, let's adjust the things in the BPI that will drive us to a more carbon-friendly, lower methane emissions intensity outcome. So it's not measured in dollars, it's measured in units. And that's why those that have already seen the results will see that the numbers are quite large. And that's because they're in units, not dollars. And you'll understand in a minute why those numbers are large, because of the different index weightings that we use. And here are those index weightings. So if we look at where we're at with Holsteins, for example, you can see that there's significantly greater emphasis on protein in the sustainability index than what there was in the BPI. And there's also some greater weighting on fat, significantly more weighting on survival, a little bit extra weighting on mastitis, but a lot more weighting on feed saved or efficiency. Now, all the indices across the breeds are the same, with the exception of jerseys. Now, the reason jerseys are a little bit different is because in the BPI, jerseys do not have feed saved. So when as I said earlier, we worked the sustainability index up from the BPI. And so when you do that, you get a slightly different weighting for feed saved for jerseys than you do Holsteins. But the net result is we end up with an index that has 2.5 times the weighting on protein compared to the BPI, 2.8 times the weighting on survival compared to the BPI, and 3.7 times the weighting on feed efficiency compared to the BPI. So what does that translate to when a farmer starts to use the sustainability index? So what it does is it means the increased production basically means more production for the same amount of maintenance. Okay, so the size of the cow hasn't necessarily changed, but the amount of production that she's doing has increased. So therefore we get that a dilution effect in that sense. More production for the same maintenance. In a practical sense, it also maintains productivity. So it keeps the farmer producing milk, and hopefully that's milk being produced at a profit. When we increase survival, we're actually getting more production from our mature cows because our cows are lasting longer. Obviously, mature cows produce more than heifers. So by default, our per cow production is going up because we have more mature cows in our herd. That also means that we don't need as many replacements. So we go back to that less rumens running around on the farm equals less methane. So as we push for a more mature herd of cows, we can drive down our replacements required, our replacement rate, and that way reduce our total carbon or methane being emitted on the farm that way. By increasing feed efficiency, we also drive down emissions intensity, because if a cow is consuming less feed, she's producing less methane. Or another way of looking at it is she's producing more production per kilogram of dry matter or kilogram of methane that she's producing. So kilogram of dry matter consumed and kilogram of methane produced. So they're the three focus areas, and they're the three things that over time people will see if they use the sustainability index, the change on farm. It'll be in the form of higher production, longer lived cows, more efficient cows. So Marcus early on alluded to the fact that in the US, farmers that have been using net merit as an index have actually been doing a good job in terms of breeding for sustainability. And it's actually the same here. So our BPI was already doing a good job of taking us down a sustainability path. And that's because of the weightings in the BPI, as we said earlier, on feed efficiency, survival, and protein or production. Now, by ramping those up, it takes us there, as we've done in the sustainability index, it actually takes us there faster. But what we can see for this graph that, is Holsteins, is looking at this relationship between BPI and sustainability is, by and large, the good sustainability index bulls are also good BPI bulls. And that's really pleasing to see, and makes it actually an easier task for us to introduce this index, because we're not upturning the apple cart here. We're making, challenging farmers or inviting farmers to make some slightly different decisions around which index or which bull they should be using. But at the end of the day, by choosing bulls on the sustainability index, they're going to be choosing bulls that are still highly profitable. So that's a good outcome. And we see the same relationship for jerseys and also reds. So that's comforting that we're not introducing something that's going to flip our breeding direction and take us down a different pathway.
Got a question there for you, Thurny.
Please, Marcus.
I hope you don't mind.
No, so go for it. That's what you're here for, mate.
In the sustainability index, have you taken the weighting of milk away? Whereas in the BPI, you have, if you have positive milk, it has a negative correlation.
Yeah.
And how's milk being, done in the sustainability index? So
we've left the weighting of milk as it is for the time being. It's but as we know, within a selection index, there are correlated. We're working with correlated traits. So by bouncing up protein as much as we have, it kind of counteracts the negative weighting on milk.
Yeah.
So even though there's still that same weighting on milk as there is in BPI, the fact that we've pushed protein up so high and it is so positively correlated with milk, as you'll see in a minute when we look at some numbers, you'll see that there's some pretty high milk bulls in the sustainability index list. And that probably is the thing that differentiates it from the BPI list. It's probably it's kind of like having the high production profitable bulls at the top of the sustainability list. Now, just in saying that, we have commissioned some work to be done on investigating where milk or water or the volume penalty sits in the scheme of things, and to try and understand what's going on in the marketplace. Because, there's enough market signals that are kind of telling us that the value or the penalty on water is nowhere near as great now as what it used to be. But you know, we need to sort of peg that down and understand exactly what that looks like, and what not just what it looks like for this year, but what it looks like long term, because obviously we're in the breeding game, and the decisions we make today don't have an impact for another 3 years. So we need to be sure that what we're seeing in the marketplace currently in terms of attitude towards volume penalties is going to be there in 3 years' time. So we've commissioned some work on that, and hopefully we'll have some results in the next few months, and that may have a bearing on what not just the sustainability index looks like, but also the BPI and the HWI into the future.
Yeah. So you'd be looking at like domestic milk flow, how much we export. We're definitely going to be exporting less product, and we be more of a liquid milk market into the future. That's
potentially short shelf life products, liquid milk.
Yep.
All those things. So we need to understand how that looks. But just in saying that, you know, and I keep reminding people that the numbers that we use when we create the BPI, the HWI and the SI are net numbers. So it's the value of protein less the energy costs that it took to produce that protein. So if we think about that in a milk sense, even if we put a zero value on milk to reflect you know, if that's what the market costs ends up being, there's still an energy cost to produce that litre of milk. So there still may be a negative weighting in those indexes on milk, because we're accounting for that energy cost in those indexes as well. Hopefully you guys on the call can see this, but this is the list of top-ranked Holstein bulls for sustainability index, and it's just interesting to cast your eye down the protein column, and you can see that, you know, the bulk of the bulls are rather high for protein, and probably the bulls that, you know, if we rank this in BPI order, that would be at the top of the list, that are lower protein bulls, when it comes to the sustainability index, they get shuffled down the list because of that strong weighting on protein. But you can also see that the bulls are very good for survival, and also feed saved is having an impact. Although, you know, we're finding that, you know, being a newer trait, feed saved hasn't had probably the positive selection emphasis that some other traits have had. So we're not seeing a lot of really good feed saved bulls yet, but I'm sure they're coming. But still, the index advantages bulls that are good for feed saved. So they're the three traits that drive bulls further up the SI list than they would the BPI list. It's also pleasing to see that there's, you know, the love's been shared, I suppose, around all the AI centres, and everyone's got bulls that are ranking well when it comes to sustainability index. If we just have a look at the Holsteins and the Jerseys, it's the same deal. The protein bulls and the bulls with good survival ratings are the ones that are dominating. The red list is the list down the bottom, the 5 bulls down the bottom, and you can see, you know, Ofstad with 47 kilos of protein sort of rockets to the top of that list, and as a clear leader when it comes to sustainability in the red space. So those lists are all now available on DataVat. You can hop on and download those, but we'll talk about how you can get access to some numbers towards the end of the presentation. So Marcus, I need a break.
Yeah.
So it's your turn now. It's your turn now. Give us a thumbnail of, well, not a thumbnail. Give us some detail on
why we've kind of done a policy on sustainability and social license kind of things. Like,
yeah, where's it going to take you, and what's the rub for your farmers? What's it going to look like for your farmers?
So I was made general manager. Oh, I'm probably going to bore some people in some detail here, but when I took over as general manager, all about genetics, and so it was all about bulls, and I was asked by our marketing man Josh Herms from Yield Marketing in New Zealand, why do you do this? Why do you sell genetics? Why do you do this job? And he questioned us, about 5 of us, on why we do that. And it always came back through that we wanted to have farmers that could be farming for a long time, for the next 10 or 15 years. And what are the challenges that we're going to see for those farmers coming? And so when you look at our industry, 2.5 years ago, there was more and more milk being bought by supermarkets direct. So they are becoming a bigger player in the milk market. And so that drew our mind to what are their end consumers going to do? They're going to, the city buyers of dairy farmers' product, what are they going to want? And this was like 2.5 years ago. So then that brought us into that space of what can genetics do to help them have some of these challenges taken out. And so then that moved into polled genetics. It moved into sex cell on your cows. It moved into having less bobby calves, and what can we put in place to have less of those things for the dairy farmers. So that little idea that we were asked to research or enter in why are we doing this, just kind of grew into doing a policy and having, as some of you'll see in our catalogues, a winning game plan, which is about creating heifer calves with your sex cell on your best genetics. It's on your bottom end of your cows, creating a beef product, which will alleviate that bobby calf market. It will then create a 13th milk check for farmers that will always be a more profitable product than putting a calf on a calf truck. So that's all grown from there. In there, we've also got, I believe, and so does our team out in the field, that dehorning will disappear in the future, and we need to concentrate on a lot of, or start bringing in homozygous polled bulls or your polled bulls, and we're seeing that now that there's a lot of that going on, and those genetics are starting to catch up to the horn product. So I was just over in America, and some of the young bulls coming through are nearly at that rate of the horn product, but they're going to give you no horns. They're going to be homozygous bulls that, farmers won't have to dehorn cattle anymore. They won't have to spend the money to have vets in there to dehorn them, and so, which is a better look for the end consumer. So it was kind of born out of one simple question 2.5 years ago, and you don't have to do anything drastic as a farmer. You don't have to put in new fences or new technology. You just have to tweak your ideas a little bit. So it's not a costly thing. We've gone out and created a supply chain. We've got a young man called James Whale that will buy the calves and rear them and background them. Then we have a feedlot that will take them on, and then an abattoir that will take it on. So every animal in that winning game plan that we're promoting has got a purpose in life, just not a waste product anymore. And so we've gone down that way for a reason, and the challenges that are coming for that dairy farmer, we hope we have the answer for them, and I think we do, and I think it's a good message to be put out there. So yeah, that's kind of, I don't know whether that makes much sense to people. I hope it does. But yeah, that's where it got born out of. And it wasn't a genetic question. It was more of, why do we do this job? And we at ABS in Australia, we want farmers to have a long lasting career in this industry. So hopefully we've got some strategies in there that farmers can take on board, and we have some of the answers for them going forward.
So Marcus, ABS is a company with a global reach, okay?
Yep.
And you've just been in the States for Proof Week, and I'm
Yep.
guessing you've caught up with, blokes from different parts of the world.
Yeah.
In terms of your Australian sustainability strategy, how does that differ from what's going on in other parts of the world? What are the...
I'm glad you asked that question, Peter. And I didn't even prompt you before we got together to ask that question. You've done very well. Well, it's interesting. So Genus/ABS are very focused on their own business and what they're doing, like from a bull barn perspective and from an employee's perspective. We knew that was happening, but we've taken it a different way. We've taken it more to how can we do it better for the farmer, and what strategies we can put in place. So over in America in the last 2 weeks when I was over there, everyone wanted to know what we're doing in this space. From Stephen Wilson, our general manager or CEO of Genus, all wanting to know and see our policy. So what we've done here in Australia is being taken up from the US to the UK. It's being made as a blueprint for all the other countries in global at this stage, and they might tweak it a little bit for their own countries, but the blueprint has been done by our team here in Australia. The general consensus from the American guys is that their milk processors and their farmers aren't quite at this stage. But it was interesting when I went up to near Green Bay, a 5,000 cow farm, Ebert Farms, and they're fascinated in what we're doing down here in Australia. And they were about to go see their milk processor the following day, and they asked me to send our sustainability policy to them so they could take it to their milk processor and start that conversation. So depending on the country and where they are, it's definitely high on the agenda for other countries, and what we're doing here is leading Genus and ABS in that space. So it's kind of cool, but it is a little bit daunting having everyone come and ask you about it. So it is good, but I equate it like the Americans are a big tanker ship. It takes a long time to turn. Australia is a small country within dairy, but we can be quite agile in our thinking, and we can take on new ideas quite quickly. So we can turn and be agile within our business very fast. So that's one thing they're looking at us and appreciating what we're doing down here.
Oh, cool. It's nice to know that we're leading the world.
Yeah. No, we are, especially in ABS for global. So that's pretty cool.
Well, and I suppose from a DataGene perspective, we're one of the first countries to come out with an index in this space. I mean, we know New Zealand's done something, and we know the UK's done something. We know that other countries are looking, but our sustainability index is one of the first. So if we add that into your list of tools, or that group of tools that you were talking about, the pollness, using poll genetics, the dairy beef side of things, use of sex semen, it all comes together as a nice package, doesn't it?
It's a great package. We didn't do it for the carbon, the emissions part, but it plays into that. And to be honest, there's some initiative that Matt Aikenhead's doing that will look at carbon emissions from beef animals and stuff. We're doing that overseas. We're doing that here in Australia, and that could have some ramifications in the future. There's a couple of ways that can go for us, but that's something we're doing in-house, and we'll wait and see for another couple of years to see what we get out of that. Checking that in the feedlots, and it looks promising at this stage. So I don't want to show all my cards, but it's looking promising. So
you commercial blokes, I don't know.
But no, it's good fun. It's really good fun, and I think ABS Australia will have a bit of an impact on this side of things. I hope people believe in us. So
cool. Thanks, mate. So just some resources for people. We've put a lot of work, and I mean a lot of work, into a fact sheet a tech note in particular, on the sustainability index. So there's a fact sheet and a tech note that you can get access to on our DataGene website in the Learning Resources tab. So it's quite easy to find. So I would encourage you, if you want to learn a little bit more, to hop on and grab those couple of resources. But also, you would have, for our DataVat users, you would see that sustainability index is now on DataVat, and it sits with our other two main indices, the BPI and the HWI. And you can also see, when you hop on to the indices graph, the impact that sustainability index has and where the numbers are being driven from. And so that's a good little, if you're trying to understand why a bull potentially is as high as he is on sustainability index, and how he compares to the other indices, that's a nice tool on DataVat to be able to do that. We also have a new Good Bulls app, and hopefully many of you on the call have seen that. And that's due to the hard work of a number of people, in particular one of our colleagues, Dennis Lee, who's done a fantastic job of getting this app up and going. And Sustainability Index is on the new app as well. So, you know, we've even got a spider graph for Sustainability Index. You can rank your bulls using Sustainability Index. You can filter on them. You can create your bull list the way you used to as well. So a really fantastic step forward. Great work to the team, and in particular Dennis, to getting that up and running. If you haven't uploaded or the new version, it's quite simple. Just go to the old version, and really, I hope I've got this right, it should basically take you to it. And if not, we'll jump on to the App Store or wherever it is you get your apps from and get a new version. But it's there. The data's all updated from the last run, and it's nice and simple and intuitive to use. So there's any number of ways that you can get access to sustainability index data for your bulls and also for your cows. So with that, I might hand it over if we've got any questions.
Do you think we'll get any questions, Peter, or are they all too scared, do you reckon?
No, I think all the questions will be for you, Marcus. And any of the ones that I can't answer, Tui's on the call, so she's there as my safety blanket.
Pete, there is a question in the chat from Tony Franson.
Yep.
He asks, you're talking a lot about high production being best, but you need to keep focus on protein and fat per kilogram of feed eaten. So smaller production animals, as long as their production per kilogram of feed eaten and survivability are good, they can be as efficient or better than large high production bulls. Can you comment on this? Definitely.
And so feed save takes, it takes into consideration live weight. So yeah, I mean, there's a bit of yin and yang in this, isn't there? As you drive production up, you potentially drive up cow size. So we get that. But at the same time, if you're selecting for efficiency, you'll be driving down cow size. So there's no doubt that cow size becomes an important player in this, because what we're trying to do is dilute the maintenance aspect. So as we do it, as we dilute maintenance from a feed efficiency perspective, we do it in the same way from a carbon perspective. So there's a fixed amount, pretty much a fixed amount of carbon that goes along with maintenance, or methane that goes along with maintenance. So the more production that we can get over the amount of maintenance that we require, or the methane produced from that maintenance, the better off we are. So smaller cows, less maintenance. So we can have smaller cows with higher production. We have more carbon efficient cows, basically. But like everything in an index, there's correlations, some of them positive, some of them negative. And, you know, we've just got to work with those, and it's the end outcome that we're after. Not a lot of questions, Marcus.
Not a lot of questions. It must be all good then.
Must be.
Pete, there was one thing there I found a little bit interesting, that we're looking through this index to be breeding older cows, more mature cows. And on the other hand, we're looking at genomics, using more sex semen to have a quicker genetic increase. So those two seem to be working opposite, looking at older cows and then looking at newer genomics.
Yeah,
What's your thought?
No, that's a fair observation, Heath. I think what it does is it, you know, and this is where Marcus's strategy, you know, of using beef semen and sex semen comes into play. And I think what will tend to happen in that space is the number of cows that are going to be used to produce replacements will decline.
It will. But
also you may, you know, depending on what the export market does, you potentially will export more females if the export market's there to do that. Otherwise, you know, the beef production side of things will hopefully absorb the surplus calves. So it's a funny thing, Heath, because, you know, blokes of our generation were always taught that you know, high replacement rates are a good thing. You know, so the more heifers you can bring in, the better. It keeps your herd younger, healthier, all that sort of thing. It's kind of, so this is a little bit counterintuitive. And when I've spoken to farmers, it's one of the things that farmers struggle, you know, not so much struggle to grapple, to come to grips with, but, you know, it's a little bit, it's not kind of what they expected. You know, and it's, I'm not saying it's everything's perfect, because we know with an older herd, an older age demographic of your herd, comes a different range of problems, and we alleviate some of that by having a higher replacement rate. So, you know, it's going to be a challenge, but you're right, it does kind of seem a little bit counterintuitive to be sort of pushing down that sex semen path. But what it really means is you might end up like Kevin Jones in Canada, who we did a webinar with a little while back, you know, where 30% of his cows breed his replacements and everything else gets beef semen.
It's happening all over the world. What you just said there, Pete. Happens in the UK, happens in the US.
Yeah. So Mike Rose has asked a question. Do you know what the expected carbon reductions would be if farmers were focused on using SI? So I didn't put that slide in, Mike. I thought I didn't need it today, and someone's asked the question. So from memory, and I'll get Twee to help me out here, but I think by 2050, we're looking at about a 6.7% reduction for Holsteins. And for Jerseys, it was a tick over 7% reduction by 2050, wasn't it?
Yep. Spot on. And red about 4.3%.
Yeah, less for the reds, unfortunately, but still a reduction. And Pete Williams has got a question. Is it a question or a comment, Pete?
Probably more a comment, Pete, isn't it? Like, in other words, we often look at new things and think it upends the old, but Marcus made a really good point that what we've been doing in the past has really been very positive toward this. So it's not like we have to do a complete, 90-degree turn, Marcus, is it?
No. Most farmers are kind of doing it already by using sex semen and beef on the end. We just need to fill in that supply chain on the beef product. And I know there'll be some people out there saying, oh, we'll get waste, we'll have too much beef. But the talks we're having with beef buyers and so forth, they're wanting astronomical numbers of beef. So I don't think we're ever going to get caught with too many F1 calves in the pen, to be honest. So
Yeah, and also it all couples together with genomic testing, because genomic testing is the determiner at a young age. So even if you've got a group of animals, you can find out your most efficient animals at a very young age. Hang on to the ones that obviously have got a positive lifetime, and those animals that aren't so positively rated, well, you can find other careers for those.
Never heard it referred to as a career, Pete, but and I mean, Sam Simpson's just put a good comment in the chat as well around the emphasis has got to come from using quality beef semen, not just any old beef semen. And I think, Marcus is already down that, or ABS is already down that pathway in terms of identifying the better sorts of bulls.
Yeah, it's Sam's exactly right. That end user wants a consistent product, just not an everyday, your back paddock or that cheap beef bull, because that, we've seen it already in some of our kill data. It's too inconsistent, and that meat buyer wants a consistent product. And I don't want to use it, but the InFocus product we use on our dairy animals, that is a known commodity because of all the testing that's been done on thousands of cows in America. So Sam's not wrong. It's got to be a good, consistent product to finish off that supply or that donut economy that we're all looking to use. And putting poor product in that F1 space will not, it's not going to be attractive for the buyers at the end, or the feedlot people that, the feedlots want a good, consistent product that puts on, they know how much weight they're going to put on for every day, for every kilo they're going down there. And if you trying to sell them an inconsistent product of who knows what Angus bull or what Hereford bull, they're not going to keep buying that. So we've got to have a value add bull or beef bull going into that supply chain or into those dairy cows. So Sam hit the nail on the head. It's got to be a good product. And
with that too, Marcus, the thing is that if you look at our selection for dairy, generally the traits we select for in dairy are opposite to beef. So we've selected for a very highly tuned dairy animal, which by design is not that good at beef. So by actually looking at our dairy cows to become beef producers, we have to go to that next level to beef bulls. You can't use Mr. Average because you've got a dairy cow that's been selected for milk, not meat. So it's critical that we actually select for that top end of beef, because otherwise the industry will actually destroy its opportunity to push into that space.
It will. And we're talking about a beef bull like your Mr. Average. We don't know what his semen fertility is. You don't know what his calving ease is. You don't know what the gestation length is. So when you're a seasonal milker or a seasonal farmer, you don't want to be extending your back end of your calving pattern, and you don't want to be using bulls that you don't know what the semen fertility of them are. So you're taking a greater risk and not being economical by using unknown bulls in that space. So if you've got a product that or is a known bloody semen fertility bull or whatever, I don't know, it makes sense to me to use that instead of an unknown quantity at the back end where you want as many as you can to get in calf, especially in a seasonal operation. So that's just me.
Oh no, I think that's, that all makes sense, guys. I think, but don't think that we're an island here in the dairy world either, because the beef world's going to start to be grappling, they're going to have to grapple with methane emissions and those sort of things. So, don't be surprised if there's some changes in that space where, the marketplace, and we know that it's maybe not there yet, and that the market for our dairy beef cross calves actually grows, because dairy beef producers, commercial beef producers might find that it's a more carbon friendly way of going to use dairy beef cross calves than creating their own calves from their own cows and having to carry the carbon cost of the cow as well as the calf. So, we could see some change in that space as well.
I wasn't going to go there, Peter, but yes, you're right. It makes more economical sense by turning off 3 or 4 animals instead of 1 a year.
That's it. That's exactly right.
I didn't want to upset any beef people out there, to be honest. But yeah, it makes more sense economically.
Yeah.
And Pete, before we finish, we've got one more question in the chat.
Yes.
Over you go.
No, you're right, Leanne. So the question is, what do you regard as the optimal average age for a dairy herd, hitting a balance between genetic gain and survival, and does it vary between breeds? Well, I think the answer to the last bit is it shouldn't vary between breeds, because the economics of farming doesn't really change that much depending on what colour cow you're milking. The other question's a bit of, for me, just is a little bit of an imponderable. I'm not sure what it is, to be quite honest. All I know is it's going, you know, in a more sustainable world, it's going to get older. You know, I suppose we're running at around 4.5. Average herd to be about 4.5 years old, Marcus, wouldn't it? I think.
Oh,
Australia.
I was going to say, in your herd, you probably want 45% of your herd to be first and second lactation cows, and then the rest made up of your third, fourth, and fifth. And as you know, who's going to win a football team? The young football players or the old champions that are 50 years old, like I am. So I know that's counterintuitive to what we're talking about, but yeah. So I've always been told it's about 45% of your first and second lactation cows.
Yeah, I think that's going to, you know, that potentially is going to change, but where it settles out, I'm really not sure.
Yeah.
The interesting challenge, Pete, in the past, and Marcus, the interesting challenge has been the things that take cows out are mastitis and fertility. So low production is generally not, you know, a huge cause, but mastitis and infertility or low fertility. The interesting part, as we've put a lot of selection pressure on those two traits independently in the last 4 years, it'll be interesting to see. I think older cows will become more profitable as their mastitis resistance increases and as their fertility has increased. So I think we're going to see a move toward older herds being more profitable for that reason.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, the world is changing.
Yeah, we are gaining in daughter fertility. Cows are getting in calf quicker and faster than what they were 20 odd years ago.
So I think the reasons why cows left herds early are changing because we're actually selecting to improve those. So selection does work. So I think it's going to be an interesting space that I think you'll find that the work we've all put in over the last 5 to 6 years, that will manifest itself in cows becoming older and being more profitable at older ages. So the 50-year-old footballer Marcus might get a kick.
He might get a kick. He might kick a few more goals in the future. So I got brought up on that, and yeah, we've all heard that football team analogy.
Well, we've just been going just short of an hour, which is really good. I was halfway through this thinking we'd never get there, but it's been great. There doesn't appear to be any more questions, so I think it's probably a good time to wrap it up, and thank Marcus for being our co-host.
Not a problem. And thank you for inviting me and giving me a platform to talk about what we're kind of passionate about here at ABS Australia. So yeah, thanks for that.
No worries, it's been great. And thanks to everybody who's joined us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to jump on and have a listen. And Laura's recorded this, so it'll be added to Laura's long list of video resources that will end up on the DataGene website. So if you need to circle back, or you've got some friends that missed out for whatever reason, you can let them know that they can fill in an hour of their life watching Marcus and I, listening to Marcus and I. If they're
lucky, aren't they, Peter?
Well, of course they're lucky. Yeah.
Very lucky people. Very lucky.
On that note, I'd like to wish you all the best for the rest of your day, and thanks for joining us.